I recently stood in a boardroom in front of a group of Irish senior executives, and I asked a question I've asked many times before, and that was, what does it mean to be Irish? Now, generally, a huge, big, lively debate takes place in the room, but this time, I was greeted with silence. So I probed a little bit further, and I said, well, what norms and values and beliefs do you associate with being Irish? Again, silence. Now, I'm good with silence, which is a good thing, so I waited quite a while, and eventually someone spoke up and they said, I don't feel comfortable answering that question. And when I asked why, they said, because what it means for me to be Irish may not be the same for someone else, and I don't want to offend anyone in the room. Now, in that moment, I realized something. When speaking about culture, silence had become the safest option. Now, I research, teach, and consult in the fantastic area of global and cultural competencies. My entire field is built on helping people to talk about how leadership is shaped by culture, how culture shapes curiosity, and teamwork and decision-making, and even conflict. And yet, the very conversations that my discipline relies on are becoming harder to have. I'll give you an example of this. In my classroom, I show a video that's designed to surface those cultural stereotypes and nuances so that we can examine them, we can challenge them, and we can learn from them. But now, before we've even had a chance to examine them, before we look at why they exist and the dynamics, beneath them and the cultural assumptions, the conversation shuts down. Now, I thought about this, and I feel like this is instinct to silence the conversation. It's probably rooted in respect, in the desire to not offend or to be seen as thoughtful. But there's an unattended consequence to this, and this is a withdrawal from the conversation. And when we replace withdrawal from inquiry, the very conversations that allow us to understand one another, to show respect with one another, stop happening. Now, I once had someone say to me in a very multicultural setting, you know what, Eimear, I don't know. I really don't see culture. We're human, we're all the same. And it was said to me with a large degree of pride, as if almost, that's it, no need to have any more conversations about culture. I don't see culture, the most inclusive comment. But if you think about it a little bit more, if you're working and leading a multicultural team and you don't see culture, what happens? You default to your own cultural lens and you lead with that. And by doing that, you strip away everyone else's cultural lens as a consequence. And I don't think that's inclusion. I think that's actually quite the opposite. Now, I also see the impacts that statements like this have in a room. When someone says, I don't see culture, those that are leaning forward, eager to engage, curious, want the discussion, you know what happens? They lean back, they retreat, their eyes go down, the room becomes silent. It becomes kind of awkward. You can feel the tension, and it grows. And this is what I call the chilling effect of cultural silence. Because once someone says, I don't see culture, or we don't need to talk about culture, what happens is that sends a social cue to everybody else in that room that says, this is not a safe conversation, and therefore it's a bit too risky, and I don't want to have it. And so what do? As humans, we act accordingly. So we cluster within these boundary safety red lines, and we know not to go outside them. And how do we do this? We start to self-censor. We self-censor what we say, perhaps out of fear of judgment, perhaps because we don't want to enter the conversation because it may be awkward, or even because we want to remain in good standing with everyone around us. Now, the wonderful thing I see is that culture shapes absolutely everything about us. It shapes our personality, it shapes how we interpret silence, how we show respect, how we express disagreement, even how we define ambition. And so if we overlook the power of culture, we don't actually eliminate it. What we stop doing is recognizing it. And when we stop recognizing culture because we're afraid or there's a fear to talk about it, we lose something really fundamental, and that's our ability to understand each other. Even something as simple as the same language does not translate neatly across cultures. Words carry meaning, and meaning carries culture. So I was teaching my last semester in the United States, and I said to the students, you know, everyone, it was a beautiful summer's day, everyone, lovely to meet you. Tonight, I want you to all go out and have some great crack. Okay, you were quicker than I was on the uptake of that, right? I looked up as I'm putting away my notes, I look up and there's an awful lot of confusion. And then it hit me. Same word, different meaning. And so I started to explain to the students, okay, in Ireland, we use the term crack. It's a word, it's an Irish word. It means fun, laughter, great conversation. Very different to the narcotic I've probably told you to go and take tonight, and in fact, the great one. But if I hadn't paused in that moment to explain the word and its cultural context, that misunderstanding would have continued. And that's what happens when we let cultural differences go unspoken. We don't risk awkward moments. They're always going to happen, like for me there. We risk misinterpretation and understanding. So I guess my point here is if we want societies, workplaces and classrooms to truly understand one another, we need to recognize that we cannot build that understanding through silence and fear. How do we build it? We build it through curiosity. It's fun. Through courage, through humility, and through being respectful in the conversations. Through the willingness to tolerate discomfort rather than to retreat from it. So I leave you with one thought. The next time you're in a room and you feel that chilling effect of cultural silence take hold, are you going to retreat from it, or are you going to lean forward, be courageous, and have the conversation? Thank you.